Hi guys, it's Hila here, House of Hila. It's yet another Outlander recap, and this time it's season 5, episode 12. Whew, the season finale. Okay, so I just finished watching it 5 minutes ago, topped up my coffee, had a bit of a think, dried my eyes because I did cry. There was one particular scene that really got me crying, and I'm not normally a crier, especially over a TV show that's based on books, and I've read all of the books. So, spoiler alert if you don't want to know what happens, and if you also don't want to know possible future scenarios, because I have read the books, and so when I'm talking, it's very difficult for me to be spoiler free because I'm constantly thinking about the books as well. Okay, so yeah, episode 12. Let me just say that, first of all, I was very surprised by the time I finished it to realize that the episode was only 51 minutes long, because I think that they managed to pack it with a lot of emotional punch for one of the shorter episodes of the seasons. So I know that there have been some episodes that have been about 1 hour, 3 minutes long, but this one was only 51 minutes. But it didn't feel like a 51-minute episode at all. The finishing, the end credits had me in chills because they gave it almost a cinematic finish where they had like this big title page that said Outlander, and the music was also different. They had a solo female acoustic singing. So there was no musical accompaniment to it. It was just her voice against the backdrop of the thunderstorm that they had finished off with. And I thought that was very, very powerful, creating that visual, metaphorical reference to the storm that is coming. And of course, that storm is the American Revolutionary War, which was the original Brexit. So I thought that was really powerful because that in itself as a device helped to sort of put a back end, a full stop to the trauma of the episode and to sort of make us look ahead to the storm. And I thought that was brilliant. It's another example of how the Outlander filmmakers, they treat the source material with so much care and respect. And that's wonderful to see from somebody who's a fan of the books. Okay, so let's get into the meat and bones of the episode itself. So it picks up with Claire, who's been abducted by this band of really, really terrible, really evil people. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the actual horrible stuff because it's really unpleasant. It's not fun to talk about. And also, even from analyzing it as a TV show, if you're trying to look at it from a cinematographic lens, it's still hard for me because of the books as well. And I think that the filmmakers, what I will say is that they really did a good job of sparing the viewer the details. Diane Gabaldon in the books does not spare you at all. You sort of read through it if you want to, or you can skip it. So I think that they did a good job of sparing the detail, and especially with showing us how she was dealing with the trauma that was happening to her by retreating into a safe space, which was a house in which she had created a family with Jamie in the future. And I thought that was a really brilliant representation of possibly how people deal with trauma. And yeah, I thought that was quite good. I also loved, as a seamstress myself who likes vintage sewing patterns, recently discovered them. I loved the 60s dress that she was wearing, which had impeccable tailoring on it. And I was just like, that is such fantastic attention to detail on the part of the filmmakers. And they also created this 60s style home, which is very accurate with the Urkel furniture and the really bold graphic prints that you got in the 1960s. brilliant. And then you had all of our favorite characters turning up, but as their modern counterparts, which I think was a great fan service. I mean, how many of us reading the books have wondered what it would have been like if Jamie was in the future, if all the other people had been in the future, not necessarily the other way around. So it was fantastic to see Ian as a soldier in his soldier outfit, and you got to see Masali dressed up like a hippie, as well as Fergus, and then you had Murta appeared, that silver-haired fox. Oh, I literally did a really uncomfortable whoop of joy because I was seeing Murta again, but it was within the context of Claire's abduction. So I think that it was quite grueling how the filmmakers really pulled at our heartstrings with that, because it was like, on the one hand, there's this horrible, horrible thing that is happening to Claire, but on the other hand, we get to see Murta again, and he's with Jocasta, and they're a couple, and they're dressed up in 60s clothes, and it was just really, it was very jarring the way that they were switching back between seeing these people and then going back to what Claire was going through, which I think was a way of attenuating, a way of abating the trauma, because this was also I think it was quite tricky, and it was very important that they got it right. And that's because already we've dealt with the first trauma of the Outlander things is when Blackjack has his way with Jamie, and that was quite traumatic. And then we also have Brianna's trauma with Stephen Bonnet, and then we have this as well. So I think it had to be handled with care, and I think that they did do a good job of handling it with care. So there was that, and then as we moved on, we finished off with Claire's safe house that she's retreating to in her mind as a way of dealing with the trauma that's happening around her in the present, being invaded by bad news delivered by Lionel, the perpetrator of the trauma that she is suffering. And he's delivering the news that the Mackenzies have died, Bree, Roger, and Jemmy. And then it stops there. And then there's a really long pause with a blank screen, and that's really allowing the scene to breathe. And I really like that about Outlander. They give you the time to process the feeling that you have. They don't just jump into the next thing, which is really appreciated. And then we move over to Brianna and Roger. And the last time we saw Brianna and Roger, they'd said goodbye, and then they'd gone through the rocks, the stones, but they hadn't actually. Now, if I may be allowed a little bit of a rant here. So last week, when Brianna and Roger left, I was gutted. I was not expecting it. I was not prepared for it. It didn't fit in with the book narrative. And over the past 7 days, as I've been preparing for Droutlander, thinking about what's going to happen with the finale, dreading it, and also wanting to see how they deal with it, I'd already begun to process the fact that Bree and Roger aren't going to be there, because a part of me thought, well, maybe they aren't actually going to go back. But then I was like, why would the filmmakers spend so much time having them say goodbye, and also us, the audience, say goodbye to them in such a heart-wrenching way if it isn't actually going to happen? I was like, there's no way they'd mess about with the fans like that. So I had prepared myself and accepted that Bree and Roger have left. And I'd also talked myself into accepting it and sort of saying, well, actually, you know what? Everything the filmmakers have done so far has been really good. All of the changes that they have made, I have liked them. And I've actually, even though initially I had never thought about them, I've thought, oh, wow, I can see how this actually works out better than the books, because there is a huge challenge in trying to adapt source material from a book into a TV show, especially with the Outlander books, because Diana, she goes into so much detail, and there's so many characters in those books. So I've always appreciated what they have done. I've always appreciated the imaginative way that they have rejigged the stories, reworked certain characters. And so I thought, okay, I think that we could actually have fun with this. And I started thinking about all of the key events where Roger and Bree are involved in book 6, A Breath of Snow and Ashes. And I'm trying to think, okay, so what's going to happen? Roger was there to pick up the tenants. So what will happen now? Will Ian step in to play a bigger role and all that? And so I actually got myself a bit excited about, okay, the early exit of Roger and Brianna, it might not be such a bad thing after all. And then they bring them back to Frasier's Ridge. And I was just like, I can't believe that you did that to us. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, okay, that's good, because taking Bree and Roger out at that time would have changed a huge part of the coming season in terms of the big roles that they play at certain key events. And so we have them coming back, and it, to a certain extent, it's kind of like what I predicted last time when I was saying that I have a feeling that it might not work because Brianna will be thinking about being home. And so what happens is that both of them were thinking of going home. And so they were brought back to Frasier's Ridge because that is where they have begun to think of as home, which kind of makes sense because that is where they got married. That's where they've been raising their kid. And they never really had a shared household in the future. So it might be quite a challenge for them to think of, home potentially in the future. So that was, and then also, as I was watching it and kind of like being like, what? I also then realized that it made sense that they would try to go through the stones as soon as they realized that Jamie could go through the stones, especially for Roger. It does fit his character arc and his character narrative that he had been up until the moment he came back again to the past. He had been absolutely keen, absolutely sure that he wanted to go to the future. But this is the thing that's actually making him realize that perhaps this is where he should be, where he is needed. And so I was like, okay, I forgive you, filmmakers. I forgive you for doing it that way. And so they come back, and as they come back, they see that the fairy cross has been burned. And then we join up with Jamie, and Jamie is going to, he's basically gathering his militia. It's the equivalent of he's going to war to find his wife. And meanwhile, Claire as well has found out that there is another person who's from the future who came back with otter tooth. So in this season, we've been introduced to this character who we now know for sure came from the future with 5 other Native Americans, and they tried to come back to stop the massacre of the Native Americans by the settlers. And the guy who was part of Lino's Committee of Protection is also from the future, and he asks Claire if she knows who Ringo Starr is, and she's like, he's a drummer. But then he doesn't help her, which is a point that Claire mentions to Jamie later on, and she seems to be really hurt by the fact that he was a fellow traveler like her, and he didn't help her. So Roger, Jamie, and the other Ridge inhabitants, they go out to track the Browns Committee of Protection who've abducted Claire, and then they do catch up with them, and killing ensues basically. And more importantly, our Jamie is wearing his tartan, his Frasier tartan kilt, and it was good to see him in his tartan. And he eventually does find Claire, right? But she's unable to speak, and she's not engaging at all. And it was very heart-wrenching. But then one of the men comes up and he says, there's some that are still alive, and he offers the knife to Claire to say, "Vengeance shall be yours," which is in the Scottish tradition that vengeance will be given. But Jamie then says, she's taken an oath; she will never take a life. And he says it is I who kills for her. And in that moment, I was just beginning to, my lips were beginning to quiver just a little bit, because there's nothing quite like Jamie being intense in his "I will protect my woman at whatever at whatever cost" kind of thing. And then also Ian goes like, "And I," and and Fergus also goes like, "And I," and that was the moment that I started tearing up, because it was in that moment that you sort of got this really strong sense of the bond, the family that they have become. And then they go off and they kill the other guys, and except of course Lionel, the scoundrel weasel that he is, he manages to escape death. And throughout all of this, also Roger kills a man for the first time ever, which is quite interesting, that the first time that he kills is actually in defense of Claire, to defend Claire's honor, not necessarily the Brianna issue. So I thought that that was quite interesting. And so they then go back, and then there's this whole quandary about, Claire is saying she doesn't want to kill Lionel Brown because of the oath that she took. She says that she'll do no harm, and he's in the surgery. But Marcelly, I love what they've done with Marcelly. But Marcelly, she goes for the jugular. She literally goes for the jugular, and she's like, "You know what? I will never let you harm another person again," which is very sensible, because one of the frustrations that I have with Book Claire is her stubborn insistence that, I'm not going to let this person die, when if that person doesn't die, that person will go report Jamie to maybe the Crown, and then Jamie will be taken into jail. But she's all like, "My oath is more important than you." I mean, no offense to any doctors or anything like that, but if you're in the 18th century, you got to balance up some things. So it's quite nice to kind of have a version of Claire that has got the common sensibilities that, as the reader, you'll be like, actually, that would make more sense. So Marcelly does him in. She injects him with the water hemlock that Ian was going to use to get rid of himself. So that was that. And also with Marcelly, I have said this over and over again, that the character of Marcelly is absolutely brilliant. They have done so much with her, and I love what they have done. There's also this moment when Jamie comes back with Claire to the ridge after rescuing her, and Bree runs out to hug her. And then Marcelly comes in, and there's this real sense of bond of, that Claire sees them as her daughters, both of them. And I thought that was really, really beautiful. And then to see Marcelly then go on and be the one that kills this person who did this to Claire, who she now sees as a mother, it was just beautiful. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it again. I just thought it was really beautifully realized. And I thought that the acting was spot on. It was brilliant. It was beautiful. And the writing was really good. The writing and the direction was really good. It was a really wonderful combination. And then, of course, it ends with Claire and Jamie looking over the ridge with their children and their grandkids playing. And Claire's just saying, we just have to enjoy this in the moment that we can enjoy it. And Claire, how she deals with the trauma is that, she reminds herself that she survived a world war. She's lost 2 husbands. She's lost a child, her first child with Jamie, and she's been through a lot. And so she was like, this is not the thing that will shatter me. I will not let this shatter me. And she's just, pushing through and looking forward. And again, I thought Catriona Balfe, she did a fantastic job of acting. And you can see why she's constantly nominated for these Golden Globes and these whatever, because she does distraught really well. I think that is one of her strongest suits as an actress. So overall, I feel like it was quite a really good way to end the season. So in terms of the books, they've gone some way into book 6. And yeah, so at least it does mean that Bree and Roger are going to be around for the beginning of the beginnings of the war. And it's a really good episode. It wasn't, in my estimation, anywhere near as good as the episode in which Myrta died. And I think that was because we didn't get to see as much of Jamie in this episode. They walked the fine line of focusing on Claire's trauma and how Jamie is the strength, the anchor that keeps her from just going completely under. I mean, throughout her when she's imagining her safe house, when she's retreating to her safe house, it's Jamie who's front and center of that. And then when she comes out of it, it's Jamie who's there constantly holding her, being the supportive one. But at the same time, not letting it all be about Jamie. Whereas with the Murder episode, it was all about Jamie, and you had Claire on the sort of like on the sidelines, helping and supporting. And my own personal bias is that I don't like Jamie to suffer a lot. Jamie is my favorite character in the books, actually, and even in the TV show as well. It's all about Jamie. And this season, for me, a lot of my heartache has been around, I don't want Jamie to experience more pain. And also, the episode where Murta died is still, to me, one of the best episodes of this season. And I think that this one is possibly the second one. And that's because for 51 minutes, they managed to pack so much in. I couldn't imagine how they were going to handle all of the things that they were going to have to cover with the abduction of Claire. But they did it, and they did it really quite well. And they even got me to shed some tears at that moment when Ian and Fergus go to kill for Claire. So that's it. So that's my immediate visceral response to that episode. It was a really good episode. I am also really sad because we are in for a really long Droutlander because of the current My Coronavirus lockdown. Nothing is being filmed in TV land. And as far as I know, they hadn't started production on season 6. It had been given the go-ahead. They've got the scripts ready. They were supposed to have started shooting in May. Of course, they couldn't do that. So we don't even know when they're going to be able to shoot. So it's going to be an extremely long Droutlander. And I've been thinking about how to prepare for that. Since I'm currently reading book 6, I'm going to read the rest of the books up to book 8. It normally takes me about a month or so to read through one of the books. And then after that, I'm going to watch seasons 1 to 5 again on a weekly basis and sort of like analyze them from, the whole perspective. And hopefully that will take me over up until the next season of Outlander. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you like random lifestyle stuff that will surprise you on your feed, to subscribe for videos every week. Bye.